Picture this, it's late October 1929. You went to bed last night feeling like the king of Wall Street, pockets stuffed with stocks, the future looking greener than a St. Patrick's Day parade. But when you wake up, poof, your fortune's gone, vanished like a cheap magic trick at a bad Vegas show. Overnight, millions went from rags to riches, back to rags again. And not just a few unlucky folks, an entire nation. That's the opening scene of the Great Depression, the nastiest economic faceplant in modern history. And if you're thinking, oh, this must have been caused by war, no. No bombs, no bullets, just a financial tornado spun out of greed and blind optimism. A car crash where the driver was American society and the passengers, pretty much the whole world. But before we slam into the wall, let's rewind the tape. Because the 1920s, those so-called Roaring Twenties, looked like one endless, glittering party. America at the time was like a lottery winner on a spending spree, convinced the money would never run out. Henry Ford had turned the assembly line into a magic trick. Cars, once the toys of the super-rich, were suddenly rolling down dusty roads like chickens in a county fair.
We are making a
From New York
purchase.
to Chicago, skyscrapers shot up as if steel and concrete were in mating season. And the soundtrack? Jazz.
Later.
If you've never heard Louis Armstrong, just imagine Wi-Fi today. Nobody really knows how it works, but the whole world feels lost without it. By 1929, over 10 million households owned a radio. And that little box didn't just play music. It turned the whole country into one giant living room where everyone was listening to the same songs, the same ball games, even the president's voice crackling through the static. Meanwhile, Americans dove headfirst into shiny new gadgets, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, ovens. Advertisers whispered in their ears, "Buy now, pay later." And folks, listen. Why worry about cash when you can just sign a slip of paper and tell yourself, my future self will figure it out? But while the cities were clinking glasses, rural America was stuck outside, pounding on the door of the party. After World War I, farmers had prospered from high food demand. But in the 1920s, prices collapsed. Desperate to keep up, they borrowed to buy shiny new tractors, hoping technology would save them. Instead, the machines just helped them go broke a little faster. And there's our first historical irony. A country that looked like consumer paradise was really sitting on a ticking time bomb of debt and credit. And that was just the opening act. Because once the nation convinced itself the stock market was a bottomless money machine, well, you can guess what came next. Whenever your barber, the shoeshine boy, or even the hotel bellhop start calling themselves investment experts,
woke up
history usually leans over and whispers, run. The tragedy? Nobody ran. Everyone rushed headfirst into Wall Street, clutching stock certificates, eyes full of millionaire dreams. And that's when the jazz music faded, replaced by the sound of shattering glass from the biggest economic crash the world had ever seen. So what exactly turned Wall Street into a free-falling elevator in just a few days? And how did America go to bed wealthy and wake up broke? Let's step into the darkest week in financial history. The one where hope evaporated faster than champagne bubbles in a glass. If you think Americans back then only spent the money they actually had, oh buddy, you're way off. The 1920s were basically the invention of buy now, cry later. Want a shiny new radio? Sign a slip. A car? Easy, pay it off in chunks. Stock in a company making hats for dogs. Don't sweat it. Your bank will happily put you on a payment plan. Banks were so excited about lending that the only requirement was having a pulse. And people dove into debt like it was champagne at a jazz club. Then came Wall Street, the real casino. The hottest game in town was margin loans. With $10 of real money, you could buy $100 of stock. The other 90, borrowed. On paper, you looked like Rockefeller's cousin. The catch, if the market dipped just 10%, poof, you weren't just broke, you were in debt up to your eyeballs. That's not investing, that's cosmic roulette. Win big or eat dirt. And the funniest part? Suddenly, everyone was a financial guru. Your barber, hands still shaky with the scissors, would whisper, "Kid, utilities are hot right now, trust me." Shoeshine boys leaned in, recommending pencils over railroads because trains are so last century. When people who usually live off 5-cent tips start giving stock advice, that's history's neon warning sign flashing. Time to run. Spoiler, nobody ran. Then came the cursed week, late October 1929. Black Thursday, October 24. The market wobbled. Big players sold off, small investors panicked. Phones rang non-stop, the ticker tape machines smoked like steam engines trying to keep up. Black Monday, October 28. Wall Street froze like a jazz club where the band suddenly stopped mid-song. Prices fell off a cliff. CEOs who had been sipping martinis now looked paler than their balance sheets. And then Black Tuesday, October 29, the worst day of all. In just a few hours, the Dow Jones lost nearly 25% of its value. Billions evaporated, not monopoly money, but real houses, college funds, life savings. Stories spread. One investor fainted on the trading floor. Another had a heart attack, revived, glanced at his portfolio, and fainted again. If the Dow Jones were a patient, doctors would have prescribed one treatment that week: permanent sedation. Outside the exchange, crowds gathered in silence. Some cried, some held hands, others just stared at the ground. It felt exactly like a funeral, the funeral of faith in the idea that stocks only go up. But that crash was only the opening act. After stocks, it was the bank's turn. And when an entire nation rushed to pull their money at once, the financial magic trick turned into a full-blown disaster. What happens when millions scream, "Give me my cash"?
But the crash
The
was just the
answer,
beginning.
a bank-run storm like nothing America had ever
necks.
seen. Picture this, you're buying stocks with borrowed money. You put down 10 bucks of your own, borrow 90 more, and strut around like you're the next Rockefeller. Then the market tanks, and your broker calls sounding like a parent chasing overdue tuition. "Hey pal, about that 90 bucks, you owe it, now."
Tell them we're safe.
That's a margin call the moment you realize only two things in life arrive faster than a deadline: sleepiness and a bill collector. The problem? Most folks had nothing left. Paper wealth evaporated, but the debt stayed stubbornly real. When broke investors couldn't pay up, the banks, already drunk on overlending, started wobbling. Banks back then ran on a keep 10, lend 90 model. Fine when nobody panics, but if even a handful of people line up to withdraw their savings, the whole system shakes like a radio trying to catch a weak signal. One person shouts, "I want my cash." Suddenly the next guy shouts the same. Pretty soon you've got a marathon forming outside the branch. That's a bank run when trust runs out faster than the depositor's feet. The scenes were dramatic. Long lines stretching down the block, people pounding on locked doors, pleading for their life savings. Inside, bank tellers offered the world's most awkward reassurance. "Your money is perfectly safe, except for the part we already loaned out." And the disaster didn't stop at America's borders. U.S. banks panicked and yanked back their loans from Europe. Remember, Europe after World War I was basically a house held together with duct tape. Germany was drowning in reparations. Britain was buried in debt to the U.S. So when America pulled the plug, the entire continent jolted like it had been hit with a cattle prod. The fallout? Global trade collapsed by half in just 3 years. Imagine shopping on Amazon today and tomorrow discovering half the site is just gone. That's how vital trade routes, the arteries of the global economy, suddenly clogged. So what started as a crash in New York rippled outward. Berlin, London, Paris all toppled like dominoes. The world learned a harsh truth. When Wall Street sneezes, the whole planet catches pneumonia. And that was just the opening act of one of the darkest decades in modern history. But those plunging numbers weren't even the worst pain. When bread turned into a luxury item, when kids fainted in class from hunger, and when dust storms swallowed entire towns, America started tasting real starvation. So what was everyday life like in the Great Depression? Let's step into the years when the nation lined up for nothing more than a bowl of thin soup. If you just look at the charts, you'll see GDP dropping like a roller coaster straight into the ground. But numbers don't tell the real story. A nation that fell from champagne parties to standing in line for watered-down soup. Breadlines became America's new hotspot. Long lines of desperate people waiting for a slice of bread or a thin bowl of stew. One joke at the time
like
went,
Sunday.
America's never had this many lines before. Too bad they aren't phone lines or jazz club lines.
Bread
They're
lines.
hunger lines.
The longest lines
Kids
since
came to
jazz
school with
concerts.
empty
Except
stomachs.
here, the
Some
ticket
fainted right
was
there in
hunger.
class because they hadn't eaten in days.
It was not
Poverty
long
wasn't a
before the
metaphor
storm
anymore.
broke.
It was the sound of a belly growling at midnight. And then came the Dust Bowl, as if rural America hadn't already
waited.
suffered enough. Years of over-farming
not for
stripped
long.
the land bare. When the rains stopped, the wind whipped up towering walls of dust. Black blizzards, they called them. Not snow, but dirt. Families sealed their doors and windows, stuffed rags in the cracks, only to wake up covered head to toe in dust like statues. Cattle suffocated, wheat fields vanished under sand, and human lungs became unwilling air filters. From Oklahoma to Texas to Kansas, millions loaded their beat-up cars with whatever they owned, slapping on hand-painted signs. California or bust, and for many it was mostly bust. Meanwhile, in Washington, another tragedy played out. The Bonus Army in
have to get to
1932. Tens of thousands of World War I veterans marched to the Capitol, set up camps, and demanded early payment of bonuses they'd been promised years down the road. These were men who'd risked their lives for their country, now asking for a few dollars to survive. Hoover's government didn't hand out money. They handed out tear gas. Soldiers drove them out, burned their camps, chased away the very heroes they once celebrated. For many Americans, it was a gut punch. If this is how the nation treats its veterans, who can believe in the system
From the
at all?
ashes of despair,
Everyday
new
language
homes
turned
rise.
Hoover's name into a
Each
synonym
nail
for
a
misery.
testament to stubborn
Hoovervilles,
hope.
shanty towns built from scrap
called them
wood and
Hoover
cardboard.
blankets.
Hoover blankets, yesterday's
cozy.
newspapers used to keep warm.
Just headlines for
Hoover
warmth.
flags, inside-out pockets showing you were broke. A president once hailed as an engineering genius had, by 1932, accidentally created the worst brand in history. If there was an award for most unfortunate rebrand ever, Hoover would have taken home the trophy. So life in the Great Depression wasn't just red arrows on a graph. It was dust in your lungs, hunger in your classroom, and faith in
Hoover
government
didn't give 'em
collapsing into
bonuses,
rubble.
May. Just free
One of the
smoke
richest
and fire.
nations on Earth suddenly looked like a giant debtor to fate
Even
itself.
hope.
As Hoover
seemed
drowned in
rational.
criticism, Americans whispered the question, who could possibly pull them out of this mess? The answer arrived in March
says, "I'll pay
1933,
you
a new
Tuesday for
face,
a
a new
hamburger
voice, and a
today."
message so simple
That's a
yet
good one.
thunderous. The only thing we have to fear
But in
is
March
fear itself.
1933,
Yes,
a
it
new
was
voice
time for
rose,
Franklin
calm,
Delano Roosevelt to
confident,
take
and
the
utterly
stage.
unafraid.
Herbert Hoover, honestly, even his name sounds heavy. He wasn't a flashy politician, he was an engineer. A man who believed with almost religious faith in individual grit and the power of voluntary
People
community.
just need to help
Hoover
themselves.
truly thought, if we let Americans rely on themselves, helping each
In
other, the
theory,
nation
he's
will
right.
pull through.
In practice,
Beautiful in
it's like
theory,
giving
like
bubble
something out of a
gum to patch
bedtime
dam.
story we'd all love to believe. The problem, he brought that fairy tale philosophy into a very real economic nightmare. When millions were out of work, out of homes, out of dinner, just be self-reliant landed about as well as a doctor prescribing candy to a cancer patient. To be fair, Hoover wasn't a
Ironically,
villain.
his dam
He was
stood
brilliant.
solid, while his
He'd organized
reputation
relief
leaked
for
everywhere.
starving Europe after World War I. But his mantra of minimal government intervention turned him into a tone-deaf
right
leader at the
around the
very
corner.
moment when Americans were begging for a giant safety net. So instead of being remembered for his
Which
great
corner,
engineering
Mr.
marvel,
President?
the Hoover Dam,
checked
his
them
name
all.
got cemented to something else. Hoovervilles, cardboard shanty towns.
Hoovervilles spread.
Hoover
Bonus
blankets,
Army
yesterday's
evicted.
newspaper used
Hoover
for warmth.
blankets.
Hoover flags, empty pockets turned
flags.
inside out. His brand,
Hoover
poverty.
contract.
If there were a prize
man
for
who
worst
believed
political
Americans
rebrand in
would climb
history,
out while he
congratulations,
quietly raised
Hoover,
the ladder.
you win. March 1933.
March.
America was
1933
drowning in
night.
despair.
America's
Banks
broke,
shuttered,
banks
bellies
shut,
empty,
hope
hope
bankrupt.
running on fumes.
The only
Then
thing we
Franklin
have to
Delano
fear
Roosevelt stepped up to the
is
podium.
fear itself.
The wind was cold, the mood colder, and he said the line that still echoes today. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That wasn't just a speech. It was like the whole nation had been underwater, and FDR was the first guy to shout, "Breathe, there's still air up here." And he didn't stop at words. He rolled out the New Deal, a laundry list of programs that sounded dry on paper but hit like oxygen in real life. CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, WPA, Works Progress Administration. Millions of young men handed shovels, tents, and jobs. Not virtual gigs, not crypto tokens, real work, digging canals, planting forests, building bridges.
steady now, just a
TVA,
little more.
Tennessee Valley Authority. An entire
Almost
region that
there.
had lived in
Perfect.
darkness suddenly lit up. Farmers could finally plug in radios instead of fussing with old batteries. FDIC, SEC, Glass-Steagall. Sounds technical, but think of it this way.
deposit has been
He locked the barn doors so the cows
Thank you. We
ate.
trust your service.
KA, your savings wouldn't run away again. Your deposits were insured, and Wall Street got told to stop playing with matches near the haystack. Social Security, 1935. For the first time, the U.S. government said, "You won't have to work until you collapse at the sewing machine. We'll remember you when you're old." Not a miracle, but a promise, and for millions, that promise meant dignity. Light jab here. FDR didn't hand out free money or promise get-rich-quick schemes. He handed out jobs and hope. If this were today, he wouldn't launch a shiny new trading app. He'd open a construction site. And slowly, America's lights came back on, along with its confidence. But here's the big question. Did the New Deal really save America, or was it the drumbeat of World War II that shocked the economy back to
But
life?
tell me,
That's
was
the
it the
great
New
debate
Deal
among historians,
drumbeat of war
and it's where
that
we're
truly
headed
saved
next.
America?
Now, if you and I were sitting in a cafe and I asked, "So, who really saved America from the Great Depression?" The table would instantly split into two sides, arguing like soccer fans over Messi vs. Ronaldo. Team Roosevelt says, "It was the New Deal, no question." The CCC, WPA, TVA, FDIC, SEC, Social Security, all of it. America regained confidence, GDP stopped tanking, banks stabilized, and people felt hope again. And they've got receipts. Between 1933 and 1937, the U.S. economy steadily grew. Roosevelt didn't just sell speeches, he sold hope wrapped up with paychecks. Team World War II, on the other hand, smirks. Sure, the New Deal was nice, but unemployment was stuck
When
around
Europe
15%
started
for the whole decade.
American
Only when the
factories
war drums started
buzzing.
beating in Europe, when car factories switched to tank factories, did people finally get real jobs. Without Hitler, Roosevelt would still be handing out shovels to the CCC to dig ditches. And the numbers back them up. By 1940, with the war underway, unemployment finally nosedived. The truth, it's somewhere in between. The New Deal was like antibiotics. It didn't cure the patient instantly, but it kept America alive. World War II was like emergency surgery, painful, expensive, but fast. One was slow therapy, the other was shock treatment. America wasn't saved by one magic trick, but by the 1-2 punch of both. And here's where history gets ironic. A dictator in Europe, responsible for unleashing death and destruction, accidentally became the spark that revived America's economy. History really
History
is the
doesn't pick
weirdest
sides.
screenwriter,
Joe,
slipping in plot
it just keeps
twists
the
nobody
receipts.
would dare put in fiction. So I'll leave the question with you. Who saved America? Roosevelt with the New Deal, or Hitler by accident? Drop your thoughts below, and let's see if we can argue louder than Wall Street in 1929. So what do we actually learn from this spectacular crash and burn? Lesson 1, don't trust the get-rich-quick dream. If your barber, the shoeshine boy, and your neighbor are all giving you hot stock tips, that's not a golden opportunity. That's a fire alarm. Lesson 2, banks are not magic safes. You deposit money thinking they're keeping it safe, but in reality, they've loaned most of it out. All it takes is a handful of people panicking, and the whole thing topples like dominoes. That lesson is still fresh today, because history has a nasty habit of recycling old tricks with shiny new packaging. Lesson 3. A depression isn't just numbers, it's people. It's bowls of watery soup, dust-filled homes, and veterans sleeping in the streets of the capital. History isn't written only on graphs, it's written in hungry eyes and exhausted faces. And the final irony, sometimes politics and war, the very things we fear, end up being the engines that drag an economy out of the ditch. A bitter, uncomfortable truth. At the end of the day, the Great Depression reminds us of one thing: every party ends and the bill always comes due. The only questions are, who pays and how? So there you have it, my friend. From the roaring jazz clubs to the breadlines, from Hoover preaching self-reliance to Roosevelt handing out jobs, America stumbled through a decade where even it barely recognized itself. If this video helped you see this crazy chapter of history in a new light, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment. Are you Team New Deal or Team WWII? And don't forget to subscribe to Weird History Bites so you don't miss more bizarre but meaningful stories from the past. Swing by the channel every day, grab a cup of coffee with us, and let's laugh, learn, and uncover the strange secrets history keeps hiding behind the curtain. And until the next video, when we'll be asking once again, okay, how's history going to troll us this time? Take care and keep questioning.